Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one. Anneliese Michel was an ordinary Catholic young woman who lived a normal life in Germany until she became possessed, becoming the most famous possession case in history. From the late 1960s, the girl began to suffer convulsions, hallucinations, and extreme abnormal behaviors. Between 1975 and 1976, she underwent 67 exorcisms, but ended up dying at the age of 23 from malnutrition, weighing only 66 pounds. Her real story even inspired the film The Exorcism of Emily Rose in 2005. This was the result of the famous macabre Russian sleep deprivation experiment. The subjects were kept locked up for 15 days in darkness without any rest, exposed to a stimulant gas secretly developed. As the days went by, their sanity drained away. When the chamber was finally opened, they found unrecognizable, disfigured creatures with macabre smiles and stares. Blanche Monnier was a French girl who lived through one of the most shocking cases of the 19th century. In 1876, her mother locked her in an attic without windows after she fell in love with a man the family disapproved of. For 25 years, Blanche remained isolated, without sunlight, proper food, or hygiene. When discovered in 1901, she weighed only 55 pounds, was covered in filth, feces, and infested with insects. The case horrified France and became known as the Prisoner of Poitiers. Real photos taken during an exorcism in 1968. The images reveal scenes far more disturbing and dark than we imagine when thinking of possession rituals depicted in films. The case was thoroughly documented and remains to this day one of the most complete records of possessions. The empty gaze and motionless face of a wax mannequin in a disturbing scene from 1968. Studied by two nursing students in training, the artificial body seemed to have a macabre aspect, as if it hid a presence behind its expressionless features. A night vision camera installed in the forests of Montana captured a solitary figure wandering among the trees in the middle of the night. When it realized it had been caught, the entity seemed desperate, bending to the ground in deep anguish. To this day, no one has been able to explain who or what was recorded there. This is the horrifying result of an experiment conducted in the 1940s, where researchers investigated supposed paranormal phenomena. The photographer, while recording the scene, supposedly captured the exact moment when the doll turned its gaze directly toward the camera, as if it were aware of being observed. Known as Hell Baby, these dolls gained a disturbing reputation due to reports that their owners heard laughter or saw small movements when no one was around. The legend around them fueled the belief that they were cursed, which led to the end of their production. They were made of porcelain, with hand-painted faces and satin dresses imitating real children. Originally created as collectible pieces in the 1980s and 1990s, they ended up being associated with the macabre because of their frozen smiling expression and the discomfort they caused to those who owned them. A woman being incorporated during a Satanist ritual session that took place in the state of Ohio in the United States in the 1970s. Accounts from the time describe nighttime ceremonies in rural areas where participants entered into trances and performed unnatural movements. A special night monitoring camera installed in a rural area of Jackson, Wyoming, recorded a disturbing scene. A little girl alone, surrounded by deer. The strangest part is that when police arrived at the site, they found no trace of the child. No footprints, no clothing, nothing. A photo shared by Reddit users shows what many believe to be the woman in black, described as a silent spirit that appears at night watching houses before disappearing without leaving a trace. Recorded in several neighborhoods in the United States, the image shows the silhouette of a woman standing on a roof, watching the local residents. A woman moved into a house and lived there for 3 months, until she noticed a large pentagram marked on the wooden floor. When talking to neighbors, she learned that the residence had been used until a few months earlier by a satanic group of occult rituals. A man in England, after circling the building of his new apartment he had just moved into, discovered an untouched cemetery from the 1800s, preserved under the basement of the building that had been built over it. The tombstones and graves remain perfectly preserved under the construction. Have you ever dreamed of this man? Several people around the world report having seen exactly this face in their dreams, even without ever having had contact with each other. The case became known as This Man and appeared in 2006 when a sketch was released after a patient described recurring encounters with him in his dreams. Over time, thousands of similar reports appeared in different countries, all describing the same man with striking eyebrows, a broad forehead, and a discreet smile. To this day, there is no definitive explanation, making the phenomenon one of the greatest modern mysteries linked to the human subconscious. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night and finding someone standing on your porch, staring directly at your doorbell camera. That is exactly what happened to a Reddit user who received a notification on his phone that there was a visitor at the door. When he opened the app, he came across this unsettling scene: a stranger standing in the dark, staring directly at the lens. The case of the spectral figure of a girl that was recorded wandering the abandoned corridors of Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Kentucky. Many believe it to be Mary Lee, a young nurse who, after becoming pregnant by a doctor and overcome with shame, died in room 502. The sanatorium, already marked by the infamous body shoot, became synonymous with suffering and haunting, and reports such as the apparition of Mary Lee only reinforced its reputation. Annabelle, the doll considered evil for, according to reports, having been used by a demonic entity to deceive and terrorize people. Her story gained notoriety in 1970 in Connecticut when nursing students claimed the doll moved on its own and left threatening messages. Several experts associated it with physical attacks and fatal accidents of visitors who mocked her. Since then, Annabelle has been seen locked in a glass case in a museum in Connecticut. Among some dark trees, a trail camera captured something unusual that did not seem like an animal. The image was recorded on August 12th at 2:37 in the morning in a rural area of the state of Kentucky in the United States. What should have only shown raccoons showed a pale, erect, motionless figure that slowly tilted its head and, in the silence of the forest, seemed to stare directly at the lens. This is the famous photograph taken in 1978 in Italy during an attempted exorcism that ended in failure, and the priests had to leave the place in a hurry. In upstate New York, over the years, several different photos recorded the figure of a solitary woman on the waterfalls, always motionless, as if watching those who approached. No one has ever been able to explain who she is or what she is doing there. This is a real photo taken by a woman during a solitary walk on a remote mountain trail. Only later, when posting the images on Facebook, did she notice, with the help of comments, a human figure in the distance, partially hidden among the trees. She swears she was completely alone that day. Dennis Rader, the serial killer who would become known as BTK, appears leading his daughter on her wedding day. The photo was taken in 2003 in Wichita, Kansas. 2 years later, Rader would be arrested after confessing to 10 murders committed between 1974 and 1991, revealing the double life he maintained for decades. This may seem like just an ordinary photo of a man in the shower, but with an uncomfortable expression. In reality, these are the last moments of the life of Travis Alexander. The image was taken in 2008 in Arizona by Jodi Arias, his girlfriend, shortly before she stabbed him dozens of times in one of the most brutal and shocking crimes in the United States. A man from Portland found his car vandalized with cut tires and a note left pinned to the windshield. The message said, "You were so easy to find, Mark. You should drive more carefully." The case was shared on Reddit and generated great repercussion because of the threatening note left by the unknown author. A common practice during the Victorian era, between 1830 and 1900 was post-mortem photography. Grieving families took one last portrait with their deceased loved ones, using supports, props, and positioning to make them look alive. These images served as mementos of loved ones at a time when photography was still expensive. The Mexican singer Chalino Sanchez reading live a death note handed to him during a show in Culiacan, Sinaloa in 1992. What seemed like just a message from the audience was actually a death threat sent by the Mexican cartel. Hours after this performance, Chalino was kidnapped and murdered in one of the most tragic episodes in the history of Mexico. The green barrel that appears in the photo hid something terrible: the body of Edwina Boyle, shot to death by her husband, Frederick. The scene was recorded during a birthday party in Wales, where guests calmly posed next to the barrel without imagining the crime hidden right in front of them. A Filipino survivor of the Manila Massacre in 1945 shows the brutal scar on his neck where a Japanese officer tried to decapitate him. The massacre, which occurred in the last months of the Second World War, left more than 100,000 civilians dead in one of the cruelest atrocities committed by Japanese troops. This photo may be the origin of many people's fear. Recorded in a forest in Pennsylvania, it shows an adult man dressed as a clown next to a child who smiles at the camera. But let's be honest, an adult man dressed like that in the middle of a forest is far from inviting. A Mickey Mouse Club gathering in the 1930s brought together hundreds of children in a theater in the United States, all wearing masks of the character. The black and white record ended up looking like a disturbing and unsettling image due to the almost hypnotic uniformity of the faces. A German soldier having a psychological breakdown due to the tensions of war. The event occurred on the Eastern Front in 1942 during the Second World War, when German troops faced the Soviet advance in battles marked by the physical and mental exhaustion of the combatants. A group of teenage girls swam in a river in Ruidoso, New Mexico, when suddenly white flakes began to fall from the sky. Thinking it was snow, they played without knowing it was actually fallout from the Trinity nuclear test carried out by the government. All of them developed cancer and died young, except Barbara Kent, who resisted for longer. Nicole Carroll Miller, 21 years old, appears smiling in this photo shortly before boarding United Airlines Flight 93 on September 11th. This image records her last moments before the tragedy that marked history. This photo shows Radiana, a life-size doll that already looks disturbing on its own. The most macabre detail, however, is that its structure contained real human bones. Created by Dutch professor John Popje in the 1920s, Radiana was used in scientific demonstrations to show the conduction of electricity, a young girl brought to life by French inventors in the 18th century. She was an automaton powered by an intricate mechanical system hidden inside her body, capable of writing and performing small movements. These creations fascinated and frightened at the same time, and though macabre, were seen as precursors of modern robotics. Daylen Pua, 18 years old, mysteriously disappeared in 2015 after deciding to climb the Haiku Stairs in Hawaii, a forbidden and extremely dangerous trail. Before vanishing, he sent his family photos of the hike, and in one of them, many claim to see the figure of a shadow man watching him in the woods. Later analyzing the images, the family identified what many believed to be the silhouette of his possible killer following him. This man had gone out on a trail when, at a certain moment, he felt the strange sensation that he was being followed. He saw nothing around him, but the discomfort stayed with him until the end of the hike. Only days later, already at home, while analyzing the photo a friend had taken of him at the edge of a cliff, he noticed the disturbing detail: a tall, pale figure with a black hood peering from the trees right behind him. In 1991, the Ghost Research Society visited the well-known Bachelor's Grove Cemetery in Illinois, a place already surrounded by legends and reports of apparitions. During the investigation, they captured this unsettling photograph: the clear figure of a woman sitting. The most disturbing detail is that, according to the investigators, no woman was present when the camera shutter was pressed. A night camera recorded an animal in the forest accompanied by a strange humanoid figure with glowing eyes. While many saw something supernatural in this, skeptics believe the image was only an effect caused by a branch that fell on the animal exactly at the moment of the photo. Known as the Seer of Santa Teresa, around 1890, this woman was feared for her witchcraft practices and secret rituals. Wrapped in veils, she performed spiritual sessions that attracted the faithful and the curious, but many believed she dealt with dark spiritual forces. This was a real group of witches in 1875, photographed with ritualistic clothing and objects. Fear and mysticism surrounded their practices for centuries. John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown when he was still just a child. John would later become widely known in the 1970s for a series of brutal crimes in Chicago, being convicted of the murder of 33 young men and teenagers. He was marked by living a double life, performing at community events dressed as a clown while committing his crimes, becoming one of the most feared serial killers in the history of the United States. Have you ever thought about how macabre an abandoned playground can be at night? The darkness of the rusty toys and the faded murals create a suffocating atmosphere. I am sure you would not want to spend a night in such an environment. This disturbing scene may look like a satanic cult, but in reality, it depicts an old religious procession in Spain. The dark robes and pointed hoods, known as capirotes, are used by members of religious brotherhoods as a symbol of penance. Myrtle Corbin was born on May 12, 1868 in Tennessee with an extremely rare medical condition known as diphagus, which caused her to come into the world with 2 fully formed pelvises and 4 legs. At the age of 13, Myrtle began performing in traveling circuses and freak shows in the United States, where she was advertised as the four-legged girl. A seemingly ordinary photo among friends hides a chilling detail. In the lower corner, a little girl cries, claiming that the little boy was scaring her. At the time, the mother thought it was just childish whining, but when she later saw the photo, she realized that behind the group, there really was something that terrified the little girl. In the 1950s, the government of the United States built fake towns and filled them with mannequins, simulating families and daily routines. These staged towns, built in desert locations such as the Nevada desert, were used in nuclear tests to observe the devastating effects of explosions on houses and artificial bodies, resulting in records as disturbing as macabre. The figure of this woman with a rigid mask and unnatural expression causes shivers in several people who claim to have seen this photo in accounts on the internet. Little is known about its origin, but some records indicate it was made in 1915 in a little-known residential neighborhood in the United States. A strange and unsettling portrait that to this day raises doubts about the reason for its existence. The Halloween costumes of the 1920s were disturbing, often homemade with rudimentary materials and improvised clothing that completely hid faces. These photos, taken in rural communities of the United States, appeared more unsettling than festive. In another sequence of disturbing Halloween photos from the 1930s, children and teenagers masked with grotesque costumes and artificial papier-mâché faces. Recorded in the United States, these images reveal how the celebrations of the time had a disturbing aspect, much closer to nightmare scenes than to a simple children's party. Kelsey Webster, Savannah Webster, and Essa Ricker took this selfie in Spanish Fork Canyon, Utah in October 2011. Seconds later, they were hit by a train that came from behind and was still visible in the photo. All of them died in the tragedy. This romantic note was written by Stephen Weber during a marriage proposal to his girlfriend, Kenesha Antoine, which would be his last. He dove in a resort in Tanzania with a note and a ring, but tragically never returned to the surface. Weber ran out of air and drowned before hearing her answer, which would have been a yes. The case shocked the world in 2019 as one of the most tragic and unusual proposals ever recorded. Darsh Patel, a 22-year-old Rutgers University student, was killed by a black bear in West Milford, New Jersey. Minutes before the attack, he captured this photo, which ended up becoming his last and macabre record in life. Amid the ruins of Nagasaki, a young woman emerged smiling from an underground shelter minutes after the explosion of the atomic bomb in 1945. William Moult disappeared in 1997 in Florida after leaving a nightclub and was never seen again. For 22 years, the case remained unsolved until in 2019, a resident using Google Earth noticed the silhouette of a submerged car in a lake near a residential area of Wellington. When investigated, authorities removed the vehicle from the water and found Moult's remains inside. The discovery, made through satellite images, finally closed a mystery that had lasted for more than 2 decades. A T-shirt belonging to a missing child was found almost 3 decades after his disappearance. The case occurred in the United States, and the piece, discovered 29 years after the disappearance, became one of the main pieces of evidence linked to the case of Jacob Wetterling, a boy who disappeared in 1989 in Minnesota. During the Second World War, Nazis posed enjoying themselves on a group outing. They were guards and staff from Auschwitz on a day off. Shortly after, they would return to the routine of commanding and carrying out some of the most brutal atrocities ever recorded in history. The couple Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka appear calm at their wedding, while on that same day, one of their victims was being discovered by the police and the media. Known as the Ken and Barbie Killers, they committed kidnappings, abuse, and murders in Canada during the early 1990s. A Mongolian man wearing a wooden collar around his neck on July 24, 1913. This heavy instrument of punishment prevented the person from feeding and moving freely, and served as punishment for criminals, debtors, and individuals considered disobedient to local authorities. On a remote forest trail, a man found the strange notice attached to a tree. A man jumping while dark hands rise to grab him. This is what an abandoned mall looks like. Many people feel fear and even agony when seeing scenes like this. Liminal, empty, and macabre spaces with no windows to the outside and no one around. Only silence and the feeling that time has stopped. This old Sears space is a typical example of a liminal space, wide, empty, and unsettling. A company once planned to install its offices there, but gave up due to the macabre atmosphere. Many who visited the place swear it felt like an abandoned and haunted building, and several people reported shortness of breath. In the small village of Lukova in the Czech Republic, there is an abandoned church that looks like something out of a nightmare. In the pews, dozens of figures covered with white aged cloths remain motionless, resembling ghosts paralyzed in eternal prayers. Many visitors report the sensation of being watched by the spectral forms. This fountain in Stalingrad looked like a horror movie scene after being bombed during the bloody battle of 1942, when the city was practically destroyed by Nazi forces. The stone children holding hands and the burning surroundings became a macabre scene. This was a building widely used by cultists for satanic rituals. Inside, piles of animal horns were found scattered on the floor and disturbing inscriptions on the walls. In 2015, a Reddit user shared this disturbing photo taken in a forest in the United States. In the middle of the mist, a fully decorated Christmas tree appeared alone among the trees, and no one knows who placed it there, since it was an isolated area far from any inhabited place. A couple from the United States reported a macabre discovery in the house of an acquaintance, a room filled with sinister life-size dolls dressed as ordinary people and arranged in chairs side by side in complete silence. The heavy atmosphere made it seem as though the dolls were alive, watching every step of the visitors, and the couple quickly left the place after taking photos. At the beginning of the 20th century, around the 1920s, a bizarre practice drew attention. Children enjoyed themselves in narrow carts pulled by goats. What today appears as a strangely macabre scene. Several portraits from 1900 show children posing alongside Krampus, the demonic folkloric creature described as half demon and half goat. Known as the opposite of Santa Claus, Krampus was feared for punishing disobedient children, and images like this were used in postcards and portraits as a dark warning for the children of the time. A macabre photograph from the 1920s shows members of the racist extremist group Ku Klux Klan at an amusement park, enjoying a ride on a Ferris wheel. The scene, which at first glance looks ordinary, takes on a disturbing tone when we remember the atrocities committed by the organization, which terrorized entire communities in America. Diagnosed with polio at the age of 3, Diane Odell spent nearly 6 decades living inside an iron lung weighing 750 pounds, which kept her breathing functioning. In 2008, a power outage stopped the machine, and Diane died at the age of 61 after a lifetime confined to the equipment. This abandoned hospital looked completely empty until a single lit window appeared in the middle of the darkness. No one knows for sure if it was just a curious intruder or something more disturbing wandering the forgotten corridors of that building. This chick was born with 4 legs due to a genetic defect. The condition occurs when the embryo develops extra limbs during formation, something extremely rare in birds. A photo from 1973 captured how grotesque and disturbing the Santas of that time could be. With grotesque masks and empty stares, they ended up bringing more fear and dread than joy to children. A strange mutation produced this fish with human-like teeth found in coastal waters. Scientists are not sure of the cause, but many fear it may be the result of contamination and genetic alterations caused by humans. A frog with genetic mutations was found with its eyes inside its mouth. Despite the extreme deformity, the animal survived and adapted, but it must open its mouth whenever it wants to see. Jeremy Wade spent decades tracking the most terrifying freshwater fish on the planet. In this image, he holds a Congo tigerfish, a frightening creature that can reach the size of a human being and has teeth the same length as those of a great white shark. In the 1860s, it was common for women to pose in portraits imitating dolls. In this photo from 1865, the young girl appears on a pedestal with a voluminous dress and rigid expression, creating the disturbing illusion of being a human toy. A Reddit user reported finding this disturbing scene in the middle of a forest. A family of papier-mâché figures sitting at a table, surrounded by masks and hanging baskets in the middle of nowhere in an isolated woodland. This is Didi Koswara, known worldwide as the Tree Man from Indonesia. He suffered from an extremely rare condition called epidermodysplasia verruciformis, caused by a genetic mutation that made him vulnerable to infections by the human papillomavirus. This caused giant branch-like warts to grow, resembling bark and tree roots, mainly on his hands and feet. For years, Didi was studied by doctors and underwent several surgeries to remove the growths, but they always grew back. In 1985, during the class photo at El Paso High School, something inexplicable happened. Among the aligned students appeared the figure of a strange, blurred girl. Witnesses swore she was not there when the photograph was taken. At the end of the 19th century, bottles like this were freely sold in pharmacies. Pure heroin, manufactured by Bayer, widely prescribed as cough syrup. Considered safe and effective for children and adults, only decades later were its devastating effects known. 9 pillars of light appeared in the night sky above a coastal city in Japan. The residents were shocked, and many believed it was a divine sign, but to this day, no one knows for sure what caused the phenomenon. One of the last photos, taken on the Titanic before its sinking in 1912, shows young Douglas Spedden playing on the deck. He survived the tragedy that killed more than 1,500 people, but had an equally tragic fate. He died only 3 years later, at the age of 9, when he was fatally struck by an automobile. During the Nanjing Massacre, which began in December 1937, Japanese troops abused about 80,000 people and killed up to 350,000 Chinese civilians and prisoners. Beheadings with katanas, like the one in the photo, were common, and even execution contests were treated by the press as entertainment. Ted Bundy appears in this vacation photo in Ogden, Utah in 1970, alongside Liz Klopfer and her daughter, Molly. 4 years later, he would begin his brutal wave of murders that would make him one of the most feared serial killers in the history of the United States. In Kazakhstan, near the city of Lysychovsk, a huge pentagram carved into the ground can be clearly seen through Google Earth. The figure, about 1,200 feet in diameter, fueled conspiracy theories about satanic cults and occult rituals. In Rome, Italy, millions of starlings covered the sky, in a scene many compared to a dark omen, as if announcing a macabre event about to happen. This is a crying room, created in some churches for parents to take their babies during services, but which was probably also used for adults. In the province of Mueang Can in Thailand, a strange formation known as the Rock Snake intrigues residents and visitors. The stones display patterns identical to scales, as if a gigantic mythical being had been petrified there. According to local legends, it is the fossilized body of a sacred serpent cursed by the gods. These images show the last moments recorded of Kendrick Johnson, 17 years old, walking inside his school gymnasium on January 10, 2013. The next day, his body would be found rolled up in a gym mat.